Without further ado, I guess we'll introduce the first panel, which is called The Power of Pop-Up, and that's going to be moderated by Sheena Butler-Young from Business of Fashion. Come on up, Sheena. Where are you? There you are. All right. Take it away.
I'm so excited to be here. After a 2-year hiatus, I get to kind of kick it off. And I'm really excited to be here with the three of you because you've managed to engage with pop-ups, right? These temporary brick-and-mortar spaces in your own unique ways, yet you've been able to unleash their potential and their promise. All the things we think about, like brand building, brand awareness, storytelling, testing and learning, all that great stuff, at a time when so many retail leaders are thinking about how we evolve what a store is for, right? So I'll let you introduce yourself. I've hyped it up. Now it's your turn. Tell everyone your name and what you do.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. Hi guys, I'm Melanie. I'm the founder and CEO of Andie Swim. Andie is a global direct-to-consumer swimwear brand for women. We launched in, well, actually April 2017, so we're celebrating our 5th birthday this month. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Phillip Raub. I'm the CEO of a company called Model Number, and we digitally fabricate and 3D print furniture. I've been running the company for about 2 years, and previous to that, I was the founder of a company called Beta, which specialized in kind of retail as a service, showrooms, and ran that company for 5 years.
Tal.
Hi, I'm Nathanel, CEO and one of the co-founders of a company called Showfields. Showfield tries to bring together the most interesting brands and customers, I guess, in the world. We rethought what the customer experience should be in a retail store on the front end, and on the back end, we allow, I guess, direct-to-consumer brands to think about the physical world as like an acquisition channel, being able to run campaigns and don't think about any of those retail words that we all like or don't like. Founded in 2018 and still here, so. Yeah.
Excellent. So I want to start with you, Melanie and Phillip. You've just opened pop-up stores at the tail end of 2021, right? We all know what was happening in the world, but you made the decision to test, temporary brick and mortar. What were the key drivers of your decision? Because you have two different kinds of brands, very different, swimwear and furniture. Melanie, why did you want to do that last year?
Last year, consumer appetite for in-store shopping and getting together in person was really rising. I think we probably all saw that. I myself got the shoppies quite a bit. I obviously shopped online a lot, but I live near Bleecker Street and realized there were so many people out and about doing this. And I think understanding that consumer appetite for in-person experiences, combined with, as you all may be aware of, the challenges with iOS 14.5 when Apple rolled that out, and the increasing difficulty to find your target customer online, led to a sort of perfect storm of events where I finally turned to the team and I said, okay, we need to start going omni-channel. We need to start opening these stores, these pop-up experiences, and we decided to do our first one in Florida for obvious reasons. In the fall, I would not recommend opening a swimwear store in New York City, and it's hopefully the first of many. But those are really the factors that led to wanting to open a store, and it went very well. So now we're pretty dramatically expanding the pop-up program.
Absolutely. Phillip, you have a whole different sort of business, and did you do it in Florida? Did you lay out your furniture on the beach and get people interested? Why did you want to jump into pop-ups last year?
Well, I mean, my whole career has been in retail in some way, shape, or form. And so for us, it was not a matter of kind of if, but when. And so I think, understanding so we make digitally fabricated furniture and 3D printed furniture. So the idea and the notion that when you tell that to somebody, well, what is that? I mean, so the digitally fabricated stuff is just, we're not using injection molding. We use, basically CNC, computer generated technology that cuts all of the wood. And then on the 3D printing side, we use plant resin and agricultural waste to make non-petroleum based items. And so, trying to wrap your head on that when you show something and the price point, like a sofa is $15,000, a 3D printed chair is maybe $1,000. So to try to sell that online when when it's a new concept, you're not really sure of it. You want to kind of touch and feel. So I said we have to do this. It has to be in the physical realm. How do we actually get that out there? And so that was the rationale for opening a pop-up store. And we're based in Oakland, California. So we did it in Berkeley, where there's a large area of other home stores. So we knew that consumer was there. And and then the minute that people came in, touched and felt the product, they were like, bam, this. And we just saw a huge. And then interior designers and other folks in the industry were starting to come in, check it out. And so we realized that that's the formula, and we'll figure out how we start to engage in more physical activity and moving forward.
Yeah, a lot of what you're doing at Model Number solves for so many of retail's issues right now, like sustainability and production on demand, which is super fascinating. Just a little plug to you.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's nice when you can show people in real life what that looks like when it comes to life, right? Yeah. And so Tal, you have the most interesting store in the world, and that is not gross hyperbole or anything like that. It's really that's what you are known for. You had this idea to sort of create discovery as your product, not actually having product. Tell us a little bit about what the concept is, how it works, how you made the most interesting store in the world. You have to live up to it now, everyone's like. Yeah.
So I think that kind of Showfield has two sides, right? There is what it is for consumers, and I would like to think that we are the most interesting store in the world, but if anything, because we don't carry any product, it's really about the fact that we are able to hopefully curate and give a stage to the most interesting things in the world. And I think that when you think about the consumer experience of Showfield, which by the way, if you've never been, it's a physical store. We actually have a lease, we pay rent. This is the thing, it's a store, right? It's physical. Sometimes I talk to someone for 30 minutes and it's okay, but it's online. I was like, no, we have a physical store. So that's the kind of customer experience. But I think that what you're hearing, in this panel kind of aligns with what we always thought. And that has nothing to do specifically with pop-ups or retail in general, meaning the customer, the consumer journey when trying to purchase something always has 5 steps. It's discovery, consideration, purchase, trying the product, evaluation, and then advocacy. And physical retail is just an amazing, amazing, amazing tool, probably not like no other, to take a person from discovery, meaning I see something for the first time, consideration, I collect all the data that I need to make a decision, right? I touch, I feel, I talk to an expert, there's a human connection, and purchase, where all other channels usually require a lot of work. And what really happened, I guess, over the last few years is that a lot of direct-to-consumer brands, which today have the most interesting and consumer-centric offering in the world out there, understand that being able to do it only online is kind of hard. So long story short, what Showfield is trying to do is just to allow new age brands, and it doesn't matter if it's a small brand, a growth brand, emerging brand, but the ability to think about the physical world, or to harness the power of the physical, to harness the power of retail in the same ease they look and think about any other acquisition channel, or in other words, being able to think about retail as a platform I run campaigns on. In the same way I think about I'm going to Instagram or I'm going to TikTok, and doing so is basically kind of the journey of Showfield and what we are trying to do.
Yeah, I love as easy as TikTok and Instagram. I don't know if that means the same thing for everyone, but you've certainly landed after an interesting concept. Let's talk a little bit about, I know Andie Swim makes sense, Miami, you're in California, but how you go about sort of thinking around geography and locale when you're thinking of a pop-up. What do you take into consideration as you pick a location for a pop-up? Because it's Miami, but then which block, which neighborhood, what kind of consumer are you going after? What sort of thinking do you put behind choosing a location for a pop-up?
Should I go?
Go ahead, I think you got it.
Yes, great question. So, in brief, a lot of things go into it. So for our first pop-up, which has been in Florida, and just outside of Miami, it's actually West Palm Beach, but close enough. I was just in Miami, so I wish it was there. For our first pop-up, we partnered with a company called Leap. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Leap, but Leap is basically an agency that helps direct-to-consumer brands go into retail. And so Leap had, I mean, I'm not here to sell Leap, whatever.
You're supposed to be selling socks?
Yes. But Leap is just, the fact that matters for the first one, Leap has certain locations, and you can either choose to go in them or not. And they had this location in West Palm Beach, and when we looked at zip code data and we looked at the demographics in and around West Palm Beach, we realized that it's a good fit for our brand. And as I said before, we already knew we wanted either SoCal or Florida or somewhere that made sense, given that we were going to be opening this in the fall. And so we went with their location in West Palm Beach. We learned a lot. We saw a lot of success. And so I would like to mature and evolve the retail program. We are no longer working with Leap, and now we're doing it ourselves. And the way that we have 3 to 4 opening. Well, the first one is opening on Sunday.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have Sag Harbor coming up. For those of you who are familiar with the Hamptons, if you go out east this summer, check us out on Main Street in Sag Harbor. We have Berkeley actually coming up in the middle of the month. Malibu, and one other location that we're still determining. And the way we thought about those locations is I wanted to learn. I want to learn what type of location works. So we're testing a bunch of different types. There's Main Street in Sag Harbor, which is pretty much your seasonal beach getaway town. How does that work? I would like to test a mall. We've been talking to Tyson's. We've been talking to a lot of these big malls. So that's going to be another location. I want to test urban areas that are year-round. And whatever the landscape, basically like looking at every different type of retail opportunity, so that we'll do these 4 or 5 pop-ups this year, and then we'll see what has worked the best. Where did we get the most traffic? Where was conversion the highest? Where was AOV? We'll look at all those KPIs, and then as we expand, hopefully they will, at least one method or one location will be successful. So then when we go into 2023 and beyond, we will just zone in on that. So, if Sag Harbor ends up being the most successful store, then we'll look at Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, all the Newport Beach. I'm going to run out of where these are, but which I don't mind because I go visit, and it's a nice way to spend the summer. So that's how we determine, and this year it's really a test to see which one will work the best.
Just, by the way, is one of the goals to think around when you see success at that location in Sag Harbor or whatever,
Sure.
That you want that location to become permanent? Is that, there's always the kind of the elephant in the room of pop-ups is like, is the end game that you make it permanent?
It's a good question. I'm honestly not sure yet. For Sag Harbor, I wanted through September, but we were only able to get through December 31st. And I don't have a lot of hope for faith in customers there in October, November, and December. But as a result, we negotiated down the rent. So the rent will be a lot cheaper, and maybe we'll close the store for a period of time. So I don't know. That sort of remains to be seen. I think it's a lot easier probably to have longer term, like to constantly, half my team is out in Sag Harbor, and I think they're losing their minds, setting this thing up, and to just constantly have to do that. And with a pop-up, I'll stop in a second. With a pop-up, what we do is, we get possession, call it like 30 days before we start paying rent, and that gives us 30 days to like get it set up. And it's a rush and it's hectic, but I also don't want to spend too much money on it, because then you're going to move again in a few months. I think pop-ups are worth it, and they're great, and you can get in all these different locations, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, here I am stressing about my move from one condo a mile away next week to another one. Phillip, how are you thinking about, she said a lot of things. I'm very curious also about the complexities of some of what Melanie just said around logistics and planning. You get the possession 30 days out, and then you can set it up, but then there's a lot going on. How do you help us unpack how you do this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways you can kind of look at it. And I think you put back, I think the ability to test and learn, and I think the market now is ripe for that. It has been even the last couple of years, even slightly kind of pre-COVID, like where, it was, back in the day, it was sort of, you basically signed a 5 or 10 year lease, and that was it, right? And landlords really weren't kind of open to anything other than that. And then I think started happening is then the market started to shift and changes, and realizing that you had the opportunity to do pop-ups, more short-term leases. You had experiential marketing companies that were allowing to take your product on the road. At Beta, like we were doing things like we did a pop-up in the Virgin Atlantic Lounge. We did, did a road show where it started one year at like South by and took it all the way from Austin to Portland. We were constantly thinking of unique ways. We were popping in and we had a pop-up inside of Macy's in Herald Square, but we had 30 locations globally that were permanent locations. We were dabbling in both areas because what we were doing, similar to kind of like Tal's business at Showfields, is that we were creating experiences for other brands to actually have the ability to come in and to set up mini, and we would do pop-ins where they could do like little shops within our stores, and we launched a lot of brands now today that are iconic brands out there in the market because they wanted a place to test and learn first before taking on the risk and building out a retail team. So there's a lot of opportunities. I think the market's shifting, but I think it comes down to, if you think about retail strategy, and it's going to sound obvious, but it's knowing your customer, right? You have to know who your customer is and where they are, and as you're thinking about physical space. And so, at Beta, we were all about footfall. We just wanted to be in places where, because we were selling companies on physical space and on eyeballs, because it was just about getting as many people to look at the product as possible, and it wasn't about purchasing, it was about acquisition, discovery. At Model Number, it's not about, I'm not looking at trying to get everyone to see it because I know that we have more of a niche customer. So it's about, we're looking at putting locations where they're close to where interior design firms, architecture firms are, where maybe the footfall isn't going to be as high, but I know the conversion is going to be exceptionally high, right? Yeah. So individuals are coming in. So we're looking at street front retail in areas where we know that there's a lot of architecture and interior design firms.
What are some of those locations? Like what would be some cities?
So for example, we're looking at Miami, like down in Coral Gables, right? Because we know that there's a lot of homes. We know that there's that customers there. There's a lot of other home companies that are in that space. So that's where people are congregating, and they're coming in to check things out. In San Francisco, I'm looking at like Jackson Square as well as on Sacramento Street, because again, literally you walk down the street and it's just like niche home stores after home stores, like that are kind of in that space, and that's where designers go for inspiration. That's where they're going. So that's how we're kind of like thinking about our retail strategy, and it's much different than it was at my last company. So like I think you have to, but again, you have to know who your audience is to hone in on that as you think about real estate.
Panel takeaway number one: move to Miami. It's like the theme. So Tal, you have you let brands run campaigns. You're essentially, it's similar to Beta, you're offering sort of that pop-up experience for a brand, but within a permanent space that you've created. Talk to us about the campaign structure. We kind of spoke briefly about this 6-month campaign, certain rate, and what brands expect and how you sell that to them.
Yep. So I think that like in general, our vision is to be able to solve the question you just asked to all brands. Meaning, like, again, if you were now debating in what state do I want to focus my online marketing, what you would have done is take $1,000, $100 over a few demographics in different states, see what performs best, and then just double down on that. The reality of the physical world is completely the opposite. Doing a pop-up is a business that would cost you anywhere between dozens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Building your own stores would be millions of dollars of commitment, which means that 99% of the brands are not even able to contemplate the thought of going physical. And those who do, and that's the sad part, have one chance. And according to that chance, they're going to decide if retail works for them or not. Our vision is to flip that question. Retail works, that's all. That's for sure. The question is, where does retail work best for you? The problem is that nobody is able to ask that question today because you just heard what it takes to build a store. Like, so much decision, so much on the table, so much commitment, so much money to spend, so many skills that many brands just don't have in-house. So generally speaking, the goal of Showfield is to have a presence in every tier 1 city around the United States and then around the world. So a brand can come to Showfield and with the press of a button, and that's what we refer to when we say campaigns, being able to see their product, their collection, their brand, 3 types of campaigns, across multiple locations, and see where it works best, again, because it works. and then decide where it is that they want to double down and have a permanent store. And so that's kind of the overarching, strategy of Showfield. When we say campaign, we mean that we allow a brand.
Just a little mic adjustment here.
I thought you were getting a hug. I'm like, wow. When we mean campaign, we mean that we allow a brand to have a physical presence to their product, or like it can be few SKUs, it can be multiple SKUs, it can be a collection or full brand expression within our spaces. So the idea is that we create our customer, our focus, our product as a company, Showfield, is to create, I hope, interesting customer experiences that customers want to come and be on. And then the product is allowing brands to have their product or their brand as a part of our stores, where not only they get to keep all of their sales from that campaign, they also get to understand everything that happened there, meaning how many people touched their product, looked at their product, engaged with their product. Again, same measurements that you would expect from a digital campaign. And also, by the way, from our new stores, also being able to see how many people were in the store, touched their product, didn't shop in the store, but then shopped in their own e-commerce within the next 30, 60, 90 days. What we like to call the halo effect that nobody knows how to measure. So generally speaking, that's kind of our mission. This is what we are trying to do. I would say that the way we prioritize our stores is actually interesting, because we today have in our network around 500 active brands and thousands of brands that we engage with. So 2 months ago, we did a survey where we sent like this D2C State of the Nation, asked our network, what happened to your CAC this year? Where do you want to go? But also, in which states in the rate to us the 5 states that you want to be, or 5 locations that you want to be in like here. And rate for us the 5 places that you want to be globally. And then, by the way, the answer was very, very simple. If you're curious, then it's like New York, Brooklyn, Miami.
There you go. We're all going to Miami.
Those are like the 3. And when you look about globally, it's actually London, Paris are like by far. Tokyo is also one of the top 5, which is very, very interesting. So that's kind of how we decide how to prioritize our next 20 locations.
I love that you mentioned the data that you're providing partners that work with you, because I think for a lot of DTC brands, a big value that they have is data. And it's why, in my coverage at BOF and before for WWD, it was a lot of like, they have so much data, and traditional retailers have data too from like loyalty programs, but they don't know what to do with it. And so I wonder if DTC brands worry about losing data when they go physical. We know they don't, but what kind of qualitative data do you glean and quantitative as you open pop-ups? What does the data look like? Go for it.
I'll get that started. So yes, we care a lot about data. Because we know who our customer is. I know who she is. I know where she lives. I know about how much money she makes. I know what she loves. I know what her family is, not specifically, but like demographically speaking. I know all of that, and that enables Andie to make products that we think will resonate better, build a site with a brand that we think will resonate. It enables us to be just better marketers and a better brand overall. So that data is key to the growth of my company. That is why, although we are approached all the time by wholesale partners, Nordstrom, whatever, department stores, we have not proceeded or we have not taken any of them up on opportunities to be in a wholesale environment, because at that point they're just buying the product, and Lord knows who's buying it. You just lose all the access to customer data. And we also, we like to remarket to people. You buy a swimsuit, we'll hit you up 3 months later and say like, hey, you want another one? And you can't really do that with wholesale. So that is why we have gone owned brick and mortar versus wholesale. And then as for owned brick and mortar, we've made some really interesting learnings from just the first one that we're applying to the ones coming up. We understand conversion. So on our site, conversion is, maybe like 4%. In store, it's like 35% or something. So you're talking much higher conversion in store, obviously lower traffic, but more like higher intent traffic. Average order value is a lot higher in store than it is online. And maybe that's like, we put all the doodads at the at the register and stuff, but average order value is higher. And what women are buying is different. So online, women buy the Black Amalfi. It's our best-selling suit by leaps and bounds. It's a great swimsuit. If you don't have it and you're a woman, I recommend you buy it. It's great. It looks great on everybody. In store, they're buying colors. They're buying the bright seasonal stuff, which I mean, sure, it sells a little online, but not much. People go to our site for the black one pieces. And so now, as we're merchandising Sag Harbor, we're putting all these bright, colorful seasonal collections in more places in the store because we know that that's what, when you're in person, that's what you're gravitating towards. So that's just one example of.
Curious, what's your conversion when they try it on? Is it like just?
Oh, interesting. In store.
What's your conversion when they try it on?
Yeah.
Be the moderator.
I know we
I came up
track
with
that.
that.
I know we track that. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But that's a better stat than just in store.
No, but I'm sure actually the 34%, it probably leaps,
once they
probably,
try it on.
yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
even a higher. I'm just.
I'll check it.
By the way, do you gather it from? So you gather it POS, when people check out, that kind of thing.
Yeah. How do we track? I mean,
is it
it was not
checkout?
fancy in Florida, but so I'm sure there was error. But they would tick on a piece of paper with a pencil, people going in the store that should not be admitting this.
Very high tech. Yeah.
It was a test.
Awesome. Phillip, I know you've done it in so many different ways. You gave examples with beta, sort of all the cool things that you've done to sort of test and learn and try different things. What does the data look like? How are you gathering it? What can you learn?
Yeah, I mean, when we started beta back in 2015, I mean, if you think traditionally retail was, it was I remember when I was at Gap, it was the shopper track data. You knew how many people walked in the store. And there was almost sometimes too, I remember managers, there was a gamification of trying to have people come in the back door to your employees so you didn't ruin your conversion rates because you had certain KPIs that you had to hit and it was based off, all this kind of crazy stuff. And so, it was always, that was kind of it, right? But you knew as technology was starting to evolve and Tal's talking about attribution and that's kind of the holy grail of data, of being able to understand in physical, if somebody comes in, if they see something there, but then when do they ultimately, maybe if they purchase it, weeks later, right? I mean, that's where you're ultimately trying to kind of get at. And we found that it was a building, there were systems, right? Through camera technology, we used a company called Retail Next at the time, and where we were able, anonymously to be able to see who was coming into the store, what was the demographic of the individuals. We had even built into our tablets where people the employee would tap on, and then we even started doing survey questions where you would be through the engagement, you were asking questions because the consumer didn't know that they were essentially almost, we were asking surveys on behalf of the brands of oh, what do you think about this? Or how do you like this? Or have you ever tried, and then you could track the demos. And then afterwards, the person would then go in on that tablet, type in, answer 4 questions of their engagement with the consumer. And then that data would then get sent back to the dashboard that the brands had access to. So then you could start to get both anecdotal feedback as well, so you had the qualitative and quantitative at the same time, which was really powerful, for brands, because sometimes just a number alone doesn't necessarily tell you the full story. And so those were the things that we were trying to kind of figure out, how do you bring both the quantitative and the qualitative aspect to it. And I think we found that was, once we were able to do that, then the value proposition for brands also went up quite a bit in our stores.
I wonder, do you think there's a different appetite for consumers that want to answer those questions at a store versus if you're online and there's a survey at the end and asking you about your shopping experience? Do you think that's more effective?
Because when the survey online, you're it's it's only going to take you 2 or 3 minutes, and most people are it's, even though it's only 2 or 3 minutes, you're there's no incentive essentially to do that. Versus in store, you're actually there and it's more conversational.
Yeah.
Consumers didn't even know that they were being asked the questions, right? Because it was what we did for training with our staff, so that they were always asking, probing, and engaging questions, but they weren't trying to sell, because there was no monetization on the sale of the good. It was all about marketing and discovery. And the same with it was with Showfields. It's you're there for discovery, and I always told people, our staff, I said, think about
you need to treat it as if like it's a cocktail party, right? Somebody's coming into your home and this is something that you want to show them that you're proud and excited because it's new, it's something they've never seen before, it's around discovery. So pitch them on that, like that's all it is. Get them to try the product. They're not getting them to try to sell the product. It was never about conversion. And I think when you do that, you break down, I think, the salesy, like, oh no, I'm just browsing, please don't bother me kind of thing. Because again, you're doing it in a way that was engaging, and that was, I think, what was the most powerful thing that we were able to do. And I instill that too as we're looking at our pop-ups, and again, it's about showing somebody that here's a 3D printed chair that is made from plant resin, because people are like, well, what is that? And again, absolutely. I'm not trying to sell you on it. I find that that's really powerful.
Excellent. Tal, I'm curious as to how brands think about a couple things in Showfields. Competition, right? Having their product among other brands that sell something similar, and then how they think about making a statement as a brand that has 6 months in Showfields, right? People are coming in there to discover something. Do they feel pressured to make a statement in a finite period of time? And how do you kind of, maybe not you yourself, but how does Showfields kind of talk them through value and making a statement and competition in the space?
So I would want to say just one thing about the data, because it connects to that.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, in general, when thinking about data, there's usually two problems. There is like collecting data and there is connecting. Solving for collecting data is easier. Many retailers can. The biggest problem across the board with physical retail is connecting the dots between what happened here and connecting it to a user. The average, when you think about like an e-commerce website, a brand will know what is the cost of getting a person to see a banner impression. They would know what's the cost of getting a person to a website. They would know what's the cost of getting a person to a product page. What is the cost of engagement? What's the cost of adding product to a cart? Like, we know how to measure and to quantify the value of all that funnel. When you think about the physical store, it's a black hole. 100 people came to a store, 30% conversion rate is mind-blowing, it's amazing, 30, 35. But still, it means that for 35 people out of 100, you maybe know the emails, maybe you know the phone numbers,
Right.
maybe. 70% of the people, 70 people out of 100, we know nothing about. That's the huge problem that retail has, and what the gap that needs to be solved in order to bring the value that brands really need. And you asked me, like, how do we position and what it is that we are trying to do to show brands value within that time. Our biggest effort goes exactly towards data and being able to make sure we can pour as much value as possible, to attribute as much monetary value as possible to the physical activity that the brand had in our store, to their e-commerce. And by the way that we do that is also very, very unique. So, like, we separate between passive data and attribution. Passive data is being able to understand, like, how many people came to the store, how many people engaged with your product, how many people stayed in a certain time, dwell. This is passive data. We know how many people did it, but we don't know who they are. Attribution, which is the holy grail of retail, is trying to understand what is a specific person did in the store and what it is that they did after. And the biggest effort and where we put our time and kind of thinking about our new stores is being able to show our brands everything that happened in the store and everything that happened after. To the question of, by the way, how do we do that, is like all of our new stores have a new feature called the Magic Wand, which is this amazing app that allows customers to completely enhance everything that is happening in the store. It's not about downloading an app to just scan a price. It's how can we enhance your experience in the same way you walk around in a museum with an app. What it does is it allows a customer, it basically turns the store to be like a website, and the app or your phone now becomes like a mouse. So we know everything that you did within the store. We don't compromise any data of the user or of the brand, but we are also able to cross it. The bottom line is, imagine you go into a store, you have a lot of fun, you go out of the store and you get a recap of your visit. Here are the things that you liked. You don't have to buy them here. You want to buy it on your living room, sitting on your couch, you could. So this is where our effort is. And to your question about in a 6 months campaign, what is the most impact? 2 years ago, I would have told you that we are trying to create the most, Instagrammable experiential moments. I don't believe that that's inherently what brands want. I think that what brands want is finding something which is efficient, which shows them return on investment. They need to see ROI. Getting more pictures in their social is just not enough. It's vanity, it's good, but it doesn't pay the bills. So for us, it's about how could we create the most effective environment to introduce their product, to tell their story, and that's all. And if we are able to capture what they did after, then this is the full package that, in my belief, brands kind of need.
Excellent. I think we're going to open it up for questions. if you guys don't have anything, I have another question to ask, but you can start putting your hands up. I wanted to ask you all about, if you had to think of one big value in a temporary space versus a permanent space, the biggest value of a pop-up compared to something permanent, what would it be? Do you want to mull that over as we see if people have questions?
FOMO, by the way, is just a simple answer, right? If you know something is here, it's going to be gone tomorrow. That's the simple answer for all humans.
Yeah, urgency and driving up demand is probably a hugely important. Yeah,
I think cost too. I mean, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
we did the pop-up model number. I think my rent was $5,000 a month. We have furniture, so our product is the merchandise. So you don't have to go in and do anything. I think I basically put a coat of paint on the walls. We had a clean box and just dropped our furniture in and did a little bit of merchandising. And I mean, it was just, I couldn't, if you want to go in and do a permanent location, to Tal's point earlier,
Yes.
I mean, you're going to spend a ton of money. You're going to make, big commitments. I think it's just cost.
Yeah, I mean, Tal, I'm going to be
speed.
It's cost and speed. I'm going to be a naughty journalist because I think your prices are somewhere on the internet of what it costs. Somewhere around 20,000 or 12 to 20,000. Correct me.
So the
and
average
pat me on the wrist or whatever.
Yeah. So the average campaign that we offer basically allows brands to have physical presence or physical campaign for 6 months with an all-in cost that varies between, let's call it 12 to 20,000. So
Wow.
if you think about it, there's really no equivalent to a marketing expense of a brand for 6 months. It's 1 month of a good PR firm is that. Mm-hmm. So this is all in 6 months, not per month, up to 20,000.
As we think about kind of the future, and I know, Melanie, you've talked a lot about scaling a pop-up concept. Can you all drop us any clues of where you're thinking about next and in terms of opening more pop-ups and then what it means to scale that idea? Because you said earlier, I think, that you don't really know if you want permanent. You might actually scale the idea of having all pop-ups.
Yeah, I think for me, the learning that we're hoping to make this year is precisely what does scaling it mean? Does scaling it mean turning some of these locations into long-term locations, 3, 5, 10-year locations, which my company's 5 years old, so it's hard to contemplate a 5-year lease. That's the entire length of time that the company's been around. But we raised our Series B in December, and now I finally feel confident enough that this is not going to go under in 6 months. And so, thank you. And so yeah, hoping to see, what makes sense, or do we just keep doing the pop-up thing and do? I think my guess is that it'll be a blend of both. We'll have a few long-term locations in sort of less seasonal markets, and then we'll have key pop-ups in our major hubs that are very seasonal.
How do you know, and I'll ask you all that same question, but how do you know what's the thing you're looking for when you say, aha, this should be permanent? Is there one thing or a couple things that's going to make you make that decision?
I mean, maybe this is a lame answer, but at the end of the day, I think it's the P&L of the store. If the economics make sense and if we can turn a store profitable, then let's keep making. My company is not profitable, so it'd be nice to have a piece that is.
Agreed. Makes sense. Makes sense to me. Phillip, how are you thinking about sort of next pop-ups for model number, or just the idea of maybe permanent spaces down the line?
Yeah, I mean, you have to figure out what the ROI is that you're looking for, right? I mean, yes, I think I would say it's about profitability, but in some cases, brands look at it, as a marketing spend, right? If you're trying to go into maybe a new market that you don't have a presence or don't have a large presence, and you're trying to kind of maybe win in that market, or For us, we're looking at it, we're not looking at it from an immediate sales perspective, but it's a relationship building with designers so that long term, we know that these are going to turn into things. Like our projects start off in maybe the 5-figure range, and we then on the commercial side can turn into a 6 or 7-figure deal, and so it's cultivating the relationship, and so we think about that. So for me, it's I'm looking at it. It's not my definition of ROI is much different model number than it was at Beta or other brands that I've been with. So I think you have to understand and go into it with wide-eyed to say like what is it that we're trying to kind of do, and then you can then set up the business and create the metrics around that.
Absolutely. Tal, long term, I know out there you're kind of whispering some cities and locales that you're eyeing. I will stop being a naughty journalist. I will not ask for the exclusive on that. But how are you thinking about long term growth for Showfields, locations, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, our big goal, as I said, is just to be like, to unlock for brands all tier 1 cities around the world. That's like the big vision. How do we prioritize them? It's really up to them, and that's kind of who we look up to make the decision if we should open in Chicago, Boston, DC, LA, like those cities. All of our locations are permanent. They are all, knock on, I guess, wood, profitable from like within the next 12 months.
Yeah.
And so, we know the major city, we know the street, and then how we choose a building, it's really about, like, our goal, high-level mission is like to make inspiration within reach for people, both physically and financially, right? It needs to be something that you can see, imagine, but actually know that you can bring into your life. So it starts from the building. We are looking at buildings like that, has like this wow factor when you just look at them, because this is the soonest as you need to start kind of engaging with the customer. When they look at the building, this is where the journey with the brands that they're about to see starts. They need to understand that something different is going to happen, and then when they walk into that door, there's this like transformational moment that moves them into a discovery kind of mode. So just looking for crazy buildings in big cities.
Amazing. If there are no questions, going once. Oh, we did. Okay.
So Tal, you mentioned how you're tracking your customers in the space. Are you doing it like a map so that you could then look back and see actually where they walked, how long they spent in each location? Are they literally being tracked physically to their location, so you know that they stood in that little shop, if you will, for 10 minutes and then over here for 1 minute? So is it literally mapping it?
So doing what you just said passively is, over it's a shelf product, like it exists. This is what exactly Retail Next does, which is the leading sensor provider. It's an amazing, company. So we just need to separate between the two. Yes, the cameras track a movement in the store, like heat map and a full journey of every person. You don't know who this person is, so don't we. We don't know that, and it's illegal unless they give you permission to cross their face with that certain point that you're tracking. But we know a movement, we know the dwell, we know that people spend 30 times in our store, we know how many, if you are a brand in Showfield, I can tell you that 20,000 people came into your space and that 5,000 people stayed more than 5 minutes, which means that they engaged. On a separate note, the app allows us to know what products customers engage with, and that's a separate thing than connecting it to their movements.
So one interesting point, the questions come up. Yeah. One interesting point on data is Starbucks is I think outside of Amazon, Starbucks knows more about their customer than any other brand, because they pushed the app and the ordering, and then especially during kind of the pandemic, people were ordering and just kind of coming in and grabbing stuff, and so that's so powerful. And McDonald's was chasing that because most McDonald's purchases are made with cash, not credit, and so that's why they're really trying to do that, because they just it's amazing the amount of data that Starbucks actually has on their consumers.
You said earlier the data is sometimes more important than the revenues. I think Melanie was saying that. Data is hugely. It goes without saying, but really it's huge. There's a question over there.
Yeah, hi. When you're planning a series of pop-ups, maybe with landlords who have multiple site locations, are you looking at your pop-ups in sort of a prototypical standpoint, or are you really moving each of your or each of your pop-ups to sort of the geographic area that they're going into? Or is it sort of a repetitive design so a landlord could ease the burden of the capital costs that you're absorbing if we kind of got into a rhythm, but you also don't want to just brand the crap out of it, right? So.
Oh yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that I should start thinking about. I mean, I love when, like, the landlord in Berkeley has a bunch of sort of mall-esque properties, and well, I've been told they're a great landlord, and so they were showing us where they have other opportunities in similar box spaces, and we know we want about 1,000 square feet, because more than that is hard to fill with swimsuits. So I think that's something I would think we should look at. Right now, we haven't really. Aspirationally, for the third-party goods we put in the store, we have cover-ups and flip-flops and sunglasses and stuff. We try to source locally so that there's a sense of connection to the local community and getting that together. But in terms of the actual design, I'm going to bring that back to the team. So thank you.
I have a two-part question. Assuming the rumors are true about the insane increased costs of DDC and what that's happening, how much is that driven going brick and mortar? And then from a brick and mortar standpoint, just like when you're setting up online and whatnot and zeros and ones, the more you're looking to expand, as a designer and architect, what we find a lot of times with retailers who are going to that side is they have a difficult time in understanding, especially if they're looking at a lot, they want to roll out 20, 30, 40 of them, on looking at things like national account vendors and how to get it done successfully on a larger scale level, the way they look at it from, doing it online. So any thoughts to that as well?
Yeah, well, the first one, I mean, it's very true, and that was this iOS 14.5 issue is really dramatic. I mean, it's increased the cost to acquire a customer dramatically online, and it took us, it's really bad. It's expensive, it's hard to find the customer, and it was probably the #1 factor that drove us to an omni-channel presence, which I'm happy about, because I think that's what any maturing brand should do. The second one, I don't think I fully understood what the question was, but also someone
Yeah,
wants to take
maybe,
it.
and I think we have to wrap up after this one. I think we're a little over, but Phillip, do you have something to add there? Or I just put you on the spot.
No,
I thought you
I
were
mean,
going
you're
to
right. I mean, look, we actually, trying to sell furniture D2C is almost, at our price points and with a product that's unknown, is almost impossible. That's why I've shifted the model to focus more on enterprise, commercial, hospitality. Now only about 25% of our business is residential, about 75% of it is enterprise. And so I think about that as we go in and look at building stores, where we're going to put design, I call them design centers, of like where we're going to put those, how we engage and what that looks like. But yeah, happy. I know we're wrapping up to answer your second question offline.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you all
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.